make some opening remarks in 3. Yeah. I've got one already inscribed on screen, but no, I know what. I know, but she, the screen person. Hi, Sigrid. Can you hear us? We have about 2-3 minutes to go.
Absolutely, and I saw 3 fellow travelers, so 3 questions, as you said.
Yes, that's what you told. You know, we actually follow instructions here once in a while.
That's a unicum in the UN.
Yeah.
It's a little bit the anxiety before a party. You worried no one turns up?
Yeah, no, people turn up. You know, they're here. They're in their offices. They're watching, even though you can't see them.
Modern world.
Yeah. Your microphone is on. Just yeah.
I know.
Yeah, okay. Just. Sherwin. No props allowed. Yeah. All right, enough pleasantries. Good afternoon. We are delighted to be joined live from Jordan by Sigrid Kaag, who you know is the senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza. She has some opening remarks, then time for a few questions. There will then be an intermission while I get some guidance, and then I'll start the briefing. So you'll have time for refreshments. Sigrid, please.
Thank you very much, Steph, and very good to see you, albeit remotely. As you know, I just returned from another visit to Gaza. I've done so at regular intervals, and I certainly intend to also spend longer periods in Gaza, as I've now officially opened my office and the team will partially relocate to Gaza. But on Gaza itself, I don't think I'm telling you anything new. The situation remains absolutely catastrophic. For 10 months now, Palestinian civilians have suffered a horrendous maelstrom of human misery, from the scale of destruction to the impact and trauma on the individual lives, of course, including the large numbers of civilians that have lost their lives. If you look at the current period, summer temperatures are soaring. The UN team and partners are truly working to address the severe shortages of waste management and sanitation facilities, particularly if we continue to look at the risk of outbreaks when it comes to communicable diseases. You're fully familiar, of course, with the outbreak or the identification of the poliovirus in the water based on samples that were collected last month from Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah. I had the pleasure to visit a maternity ward, a mobile ward that was just approved for use in Gaza, run by UNFPA and the International Medical Corps. And they're truly brave women, doctors, nurses, working to ensure safe deliveries, as well as a high number of C-sections, but under horrendous circumstances. And normally, babies, of course, bring only joy and a momentary sense of relief to the families. But we also know that many of the mothers are deeply worried about the future and the world, the space they're bringing their children into. I've also learned from doctors that the rate of miscarriage in first and second trimester is on the rise, and the explanations are not clear, and they'll conduct studies into that. At the same hospitals, I visited children with severe, often chronic medical conditions that only can be treated if they are medevaced. A number of these children have been displaced 4 or 5 times within Gaza, each time in pursuit of safety and medical shelter. I think it's quite difficult for us to even imagine. I've also spoken to a number of NGOs. I do so each time when I visit, and humanitarians, to discuss the challenges, what my mission can do through the political good offices that I prevail of, through the access that we have at the political level to see what their needs are. And the list by the NGOs is very similar, of course, to what you hear of the UN. Lack of law and order, difficulty in operating, the access issues, safety and security, particularly for Palestinian NGOs, but also international NGOs, and the difficulty of distribution if and when the goods, of course, arrive into Gaza. I'd like to make a particular shout out for the Palestinian NGOs, who most of them have lost buildings, working equipment, anything. These were the ones that are closest to their people. They've delivered in previous times. They've worked under Hamas, and they're now seeking to be that vibrant voice of civil society. And I think they deserve a particular notion of support. Of course, everything we do is also to ensure that we're ready for if and when that so much needed ceasefire is actually announced and formalized. The UN and its partners is working to ramp up the supplies through pre-positioning from Jordan and Egypt. We're asking the donors to keep financing, and of course, at the political level, I engage with everyone to ensure we can actually do so and deliver. Last but not least, the famous mechanism under Resolution 2720, it's working. It's capturing aid supplies from Jordan, Cyprus, West Bank into Gaza. We're finalizing with Egypt. And as I mentioned before, the monitors are ready to be deployed inside Gaza. They're ready to pick up their visas as they have been approved. But what we need is an immediate and full ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and of course, continued access to start to meet the needs, but also really think of a future for Palestinians and Israelis alike in the pursuit of peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sirife?
Ms. Kaag, thank you very much for the briefing. I'm Sherifa Chitin from Anadolu Agency, and I wanted to ask you about a question about the reports, and also there's a video posted by an Israeli soldier showing the bombing of the drinking water reservoir in Rafah. And the soldier posted this video with the comments saying, destruction of the Tal Sultan water reservoir in honor of Shabbat. And the reservoir is located in an area that was designated as a so-called safe zone by the Israeli army. And as you know, according to international law, in connection with the prohibition of starvation as a method of warfare, during the conduct of hostilities, it's prohibited to attack, destroy objects that are indispensable for the survival of civilian population, and this includes water installations and supplies and irrigation work. So what is your reaction to this attack? Thank you.
I'm sorry to say I'm not in the habit of commenting on things I haven't seen. I have to rely on your rendition, but international humanitarian law is very clear what it asks of parties to the conflict. So I don't think you need an additional commentary from me. In the meantime, what we do need, regardless, also in compliance and alignment with international law, is for safe access, safety and security to deliver, and we need to obviously ramp up all facilities that provide water, that we have clean water for the population, that we can provide for sanitation, and all the other issues that all my colleagues work towards and I have political discussions on. The video, I have to leave for other judges. I haven't seen it, but it's very clear what international humanitarian law asks of parties to the conflict.
Ibtisam Azam?
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Ms. Kaag. I have a few follow-ups. First, if you could walk us through, I mean, you just came back from Gaza, as you said. If you could walk us through things you saw, talks you had with people, so we have better understanding for what you saw and things that affected you. And also on the mechanism. You said that the mechanism is working. But the question here, whether that translating into better aid delivery to Palestinians, and if it's not, then beside the ceasefire that you desperately need, what else you need, whether financing and other. And the last thing on vaccination, the Israeli army is vaccinating their soldiers, but against polio and other diseases. But who is going to vaccinate Palestinians? There are some reports that the Israelis are not allowing enough vaccine to enter Gaza. Can you confirm that? Can you say something to that? Thank you. And my name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper.
Thank you very much, Ibtisam. I recognize your face from New York. What I see, you know, I think you only see things in a way when you speak to people. So, for instance, at this visit, I spoke to the patients, a number of them women in this case, in the maternity ward. I also met briefly a number of women who'd had a miscarriage. Now, there is a moment of intense sadness in the life of a woman. When it came to the ones who had given birth, it's very clear in my conversation that they are worried about, as I mentioned, what future, even the food. Some of the mothers have gone into preterm labor because of malnutrition, stress. All the normal factors one could not even conceive of are affecting these women. Some of them are widows. The list could go on and on. If you look at the level of destruction each time I visit Gaza, to my eye, it is almost incomprehensible. And it just translates itself then into statistics, i.e. 87% of medical facilities destroyed. When you see it yourself coming out of, let's say, peaceful Amman or just, let's say, Jerusalem, it is almost inconceivable to the eye, and it begs the question, of course, what are we asking? What suffering and trauma is inflicted on innocent civilians? And what is the message you give about the ability to recover and reconstruct Gaza? So my political purpose is always to not only speak about humanitarian assistance, but also try to create a prospect of hope where human dignity can be restored in a way that sadly cannot take away the losses and the trauma, but creates a pathway that children will receive again informal schooling, that there are places where they are safe for people to talk about their mental health challenges, that we can start to think about the rehabilitation of infrastructure. None of that is perhaps possible all in once, but we need to keep our eye on the ball, have a strategic focus, and also deliver for people right now. Now, when it comes to the mechanism is not a panacea. It's not an independent actor. It's not a living human being. It is a system to fast track. It is a system to mainstream. It is a system to organize what till now was a fairly bilateralized member state over member state process of getting approvals. It is Security Council ordained. There's no other authority than the Security Council. So it's a tool to get approvals, to have clarity and transparency around denials, refusals, ideally to solve it, but also to know the typology of goods that are entering Gaza. So we have the same data for everyone to be shared by everyone. It builds transparency, and it is supposed to facilitate the prioritization by the humanitarians. You can also look at it with a view to the future of recovery and reconstruction, which is even more important. On the vaccines, the WHO is working very closely, I believe in this case through COGAT. I understand the Minister of Defense, Gallant, has approved the import of a high number of much-needed vaccines, polio vaccines, particularly, of course, for the under fives, if they haven't been vaccinated yet. Gaza was fortunate in the past that it had a high vaccination ratio, but that's not enough, because as we know as well, others are also advised to take boosters. So we need to keep a very sharp track and monitoring, and I'm also following this up on behalf of my colleagues in WHO. It's not the IDF that's vaccinating, to my understanding. WHO is organizing this with partners.
Thank you. Tony?
Thank you. Tony Naddaf, Al Hurra TV. Last week, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu outlined a post-war Gaza vision in his speech in front of the US Congress. I'm sure you heard it. I'm not going to repeat it. I just want to focus on, like, he mentioned demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. He mentioned Israel must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror. My question is, does this vision align with your recovery and reconstruction plans, or meaning does it help, or is it going to halt your reconstruction plans in Gaza? And also, if the UN agrees on this vision, or maybe you have another view on this. Thank you.
Well, let me take a step back. I think it's always important that we are very cognizant of the fact that the guarantors and the parties, through a number of the guarantors, are talking about the ceasefire deal in the phases that have been outlined, have been endorsed by President Biden. The UN, Secretary General, myself, other colleagues, Floor Wennesland, have always been very clear that we seek the very swift return and the resumption of responsibilities by the Palestinian Authority. It should also be a Palestinian choice. So when we talk about recovery and reconstruction, to our understanding, there's a clear role for the Palestinian Authority when it comes to the priorities, when it comes to empowerment, when it comes to the ownership and the support by the population of what needs to be done, where it needs to be done. Recovery and reconstruction is not an easy process. If you look at very simple, important issues, land ownership. What type of schooling do children want if it's not in an UNRWA school, if they go to a public sector school? What are the needs? The job creation. It's a long list. I outlined some of that in my council briefing of 2nd of July. And of course, I'm not in the midst or privy to the details of the negotiations on the ceasefire, where we know the withdrawal of the IDF is one of the clear issues that's being discussed. So I'm not going to anticipate and certainly not speculate. That's more for sort of coffee table rounds, but not, I think, in this meeting. That would be very foolhardy on my part. The UN's vision on this, I think, is quite clear, and we stand ready to support as part of a peace and security agenda.
Great, thank you. I apologize, but we have to let Ms. Kaag go, but I know you'll be back here in front of the press when you come back to New York.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And I'll be back in about 10 minutes or